Hello, I'm Claire Smith and welcome to my channel. So today's video is going to be all about L'Orchestre Parfums. So they have 13 fragrances in total, and in this video I'm going to talk about 8 fragrances from their collection. I have this sample set that was gifted to me by Lizzie at Rose & Jones. Thank you so much for Lizzie for letting me try these out. And she gave me 7 fragrances in total, so this sample set, an extra one, and then also I got an extra sample from M at EMS Heart Notes. So thank you so much to M as well. So these fragrances, I really was quite enamoured with this brand, and I ended up buying a full bottle of one of these samples. If you watch my channel, you will probably know already which of those fragrances that was, but if you don't, then this will be a nice surprise at the end of the video. So L'Orchestre Parfums are a brand that is based around music as a concept in perfumery, so they make fragrances that they deem to be up-tempo or slower beats, and really they are trying to reflect individual types of music or individual instruments sometimes in their fragrances. And I really love this idea. I really like the idea of music and fragrances together, and I think it's something that other brands have started to recognise as a real connection, you know, a sensory connection really. So L'Orchestre Parfums actually sell a 15ml bottle size, so you can try out smaller quantities if you want to, but they also sell the full 100ml bottles. So let's get on with this. What's the first fragrance? So the first fragrance is called Ambre, and this one is a rich and velvety, almost gourmand feeling amber fragrance. This is smoked, spicy and chocolatey, and initially has a little bit of citrus to it, but really if you enjoy a gourmand feeling amber fragrance, this one could be for you. It's resinous with an almost sort of baked, vanillic tonka feel about it. It's almost a little bit Christmassy too. I really do enjoy ambers, and this one is a really nicely done one. So it's sweet, smoky and vanillic, and I think, you know, there is a little bit of isoe super here, but it's really subtly done, really nicely used. I think from other fragrances that I've tried, I'd compare this one to something like Tiger by Her Side. It's probably less spicy than Tiger by Her Side, and it's more along the lines of something more chocolatey than Tiger by Her Side, but it's still quite subtle. I think this one just has a really nice velvety smoothness to it, and I really enjoyed this one. So that's Ambre. The next fragrance is called Flamenco Neroli. So Neroli is never really my first choice for a fragrance note, but I really like this one. So it really focuses around the more floral aspects of Neroli rather than the more citrusy aspects of Neroli. It's not sharp at all, this one. So it's really bright and fresh to begin with, and there's also some jasmine. It feels quite heady and quite green. As this dries down, it becomes more soapy, more bitter, and almost a little bit more savoury. It's a buttery, soapy citrus with a growing woodiness. As it dries down further, it begins to remind me of a health food shop. It becomes a little bit powdery, and the ginger really kicks off at this point. It becomes almost a little bit earthy too. I think this one is just perhaps not for me because I'm not the world's greatest fan of Neroli, as I've said, but I do think the opening to this is beautiful. I love that kind of green, floral Neroli feel in the beginning along with the jasmine. I think that's beautiful. So that's Flamenco Neroli. Next up is Darbouka. So this fragrance is an earthy, spiced, warm fragrance, and it has a dark tea feel to it. It's sweet and powdery, but it's really odd to me. It's almost leathery, but the red feeling earthy spices really dominate at the beginning along with some powdery resins. As this dries down, it mainly smells powdery, but with some earthy soapiness. It's really strange, this one, probably just not for me. So that's Darbouka. Next is one called Rose Trombone. So this is a fresh, sweet pink rose to begin with. It's like rose water, but with a really sugary, sweet pear. It's almost a bit like a marshmallow, but with a creamy, sweet musk. I found this very, very sweet to begin with, but it does turn soapier as it dries down, and the rose and the pear really fade back. It then becomes a soft, creamy, slightly vanillic feeling musk. It's almost a little bit dessert-like. It could almost be on the verge of something like caramel, but it's not quite there. It's a sweet, syrupy dry down with an almost patchouli-like feel. So that's Rose Trombone. So the next fragrance is called Encens Asakusa. So this fragrance is aldehydes, frankincense, a warm violet, a chalky iris, and a warm woodiness. This fragrance really makes me think of the aldehydes that are in Chanel fragrances to begin with, but then that really begins to fade back from the initial spray. The fragrance becomes more powdery, woody, and has a mild, earthy spice to it. This is sweeter and more vanillic as it dries down. I actually really like this one. I like the aldehydes with the powdery feel and also the resins. I thought there was a lot of contrast going on in this fragrance. That's Encens Asakusa. Next up we have Cuir Kora, so I'm expecting some leather here. So this is a smoky, warm and resinous leather fragrance. It makes me think of a very cool bloke in a leather jacket who wears Doc Marten boots in the beginning. I think the thing that makes me think of Doc Marten boots is the fact that the resins make the leather feel very thick to begin with. As it dries down, it smooths out and it becomes woodier and more powdery. The leather becomes more suedey and even slightly vanillic. The resins are present throughout though, and they really do stick around to the end. This fragrance is really strong to begin with, but it really calms down very quickly. The initial smokiness in the start of the fragrance really disappears completely within about 40 minutes and it becomes very much a skin scent. I was quite disappointed by this one because it started out so strong and it just faded so much and so quickly that I was quite shocked by it. So that's Cuir Kora. Next up is the first fragrance that I ever tried from L'Orchestre Parfums, and I remember being blown away by it. This one's Piano Santal. So Piano Santal is all about a milky skin-like feel, and it's quite a sweet fragrance as well. So it opens with a very, very gentle citrus, but it's mainly about that skin-like sandalwood. It's milky and spiced, almost like nutmeg on the top of a glass of milk. There's something floral that isn't listed, and to me it's a bit of a heady jasmine. It's quite molecular, this fragrance. There's a bit of ambroxan to begin with, but it's relatively mild, and then in the dry down there's some cachemire, but again it's very nicely done and it fits in with the fragrance. If you love warm, skin-like, milky sandalwoods, then this one is the fragrance for you. I find this one delicious and I love the sweetness of it. So that's Piano Santal. So next up we have Bouquet Encore, and this fragrance is a slightly spiced tuberose fragrance. So it's a really hot, peppery, earthy spiciness along with a really sweet, creamy tuberose. It's a rich, petally feeling tuberose, and there's also just this really smooth vanilla underneath the whole fragrance. There's also a little bit of jasmine supporting the tuberose, but it's really mainly about the spicy tuberose. And the fragrance just smells bright and sparkly with that kind of orange feeling pepperiness. The dry down is just that rich, spicy, orange feeling tuberose musk. It's really impactful and it's something that lasts a long time as well. But I love that the spiciness stays into the dry down along with that creamy tuberose. So that's Bouquet Encore. Next up is Mono Cachemire. It's one of those molecular feeling fragrances, so something with cashmere and something with ambroxan, but also with ambrette and also iris. It's a little powdery, a little woody. It's really mainly along the lines of something like Glossier You. I think if you really sort of dialed that fragrance down a few notches, then you might approach something like Mono Cachemire. It's definitely nowhere near as strong as something like Fleur de Peau. This is very, very delicate, very skin-like and very ethereal feeling. Something that I think if you're looking for a punchier fragrance, this is not it for you. But then I think if you're looking within this scent profile, you're probably not looking for a punchy fragrance. This was long lasting but pretty linear on me. I think whilst I like it, I've just smelt this a few times before, and I think if I were to choose a fragrance, I'd probably choose something like Fleur de Peau by Diptyque over this one. So that's Mono Cachemire. So I think in summary for L'Orchestre Parfums, what I've learnt from trying their sample sets is that they all seem to have some element of spice to them. There's always a bit of an earthy spice, an earthy dry spice, apart from maybe rose trombone and Mono Cachemire. The fragrances also tend to be on the warmer side, and they also tend to have some ambroxan in them. Although this house does ambroxan really well, it's quite subtle, but it's definitely present. So if I rank these now from my least favourite to my most favourite, if you watch my channel, you probably know which of these I've bought. So the surprise is spoilt for you. But my least favourite here was Darbouka. The spices just felt very earthy, and the powdery, soapy dry down just wasn't for me. Next was Mono Cachemire. If you've smelt other fragrances in that genre, I think you've probably smelt them done better than Mono Cachemire. It's a light, inoffensive fragrance, but for the price point, personally, I would expect a bit more. Next up was Flamenco Neroli. I really like the touch of the green jasmine in the beginning, And I liked the beginning of the fragrance overall. The dry down was less for me, but really for a Neroli fragrance, I really did like that one. Next was Cuir Kora. That one just wasn't for me in the opening with the smokiness, but I did enjoy the dry down. It was just generally a little bit of a quiet fragrance. Next was Rose Trombone. It's a very dreamlike fragrance. It's almost like you're smelling roses in a land made otherwise of marshmallow and Turkish delight. It's just a little bit too sweet for me. But if you like sweet fragrances and if you like powdery fragrances, that might be one to check out. Next was Encens Asakusa. I just really like the aldehydes and the chalky iris and the violet in this fragrance. That just appeals to me. Next is Ambre Cello. I just really like the velvety texture of that fragrance, and I thought it was a really beautiful amber, and I enjoyed the chocolatey feel to it as well. In the number 2 spot is Piano Santal. It's just the most beautiful, milky sandalwood, very skin-like, and totally something that I think a lot of people could very easily fall in love with. Well worth checking out Piano Santal. And my number 1 is actually the one that I've bought, and that's Bouquet Encore. I just love the spiciness of it. I love the vanillic feel of it, and I absolutely adore the tuberose in it as well. Together, the combination is just so striking and so different to everything else I've smelt, and I would really recommend trying this one. So that's Bouquet Encore. So I hope you've enjoyed the video. If you have enjoyed the video, then please press the like button, and please also consider subscribing if you haven't done already. And please let me know, have you tried any of these fragrances from L'Orchestre Parfums? Which are your favourite? Do you own any fragrances from L'Orchestre Parfums? I'd be really interested to hear what you have to say about the brand, and also what you think of the other fragrances that I haven't explored in this video. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.